Hello and welcome to Gender Discourse on this very first day of 2015. I'm Sohaila Kapoor and I wish all our viewers a very happy new year from our team. Today is a good day to introspect on how effective has women's empowerment been in 2014, both in terms of social as well as legislative measures. The United Nations defines women's empowerment as her sense of self-worth, her right to live and to determine choices, her right to have access to opportunities and resources, and her right to have the power to control her own destiny. The Indian Constitution also grants equality to women and empowers the central and state governments to adopt measures of positive discrimination in favor of women. Which milestone have we reached in this arduous journey? Gender Discourse will examine this today. My guests today are Shailaja Chandra, former IAS officer, Devi Cherian, columnist, Maya John, social activist, and Sonali Sharma, communication director, HelpAge India, and a theatre personality. Welcome to all of you on this show.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Right. Now, the principle of gender equality has been enshrined in the Constitution, as you all know. And in recent years, the empowerment of women has been acknowledged as the central issue in determining the status of women. As a result, the National Commission for Women was set up by an Act of Parliament in 1990 to safeguard the rights and legal entitlements of women. The 73rd and 74th Amendments 1993 to the Constitution of India have provided for the reservation of seats in the local bodies of panchayats and municipalities for women, laying a strong foundation for their participation in decision-making at the local levels. Yet we seem to have stopped short of our goals, and women's rights are still only partially enforceable. What is the reason for this, do you think? Devi?
I think it's just all on paper still. It's all in the air, as political parties are not really interested in it for some reason. And also, women empowerment for me would mean education, a right to education, a right to health, but above all, a right to information, that they have these rights, but who's going to inform them? You know, you need somebody there who's going to pass the buck, that's saying, okay, this is these are the legislations that have been made, and this is how you can make use of them. But you see, that whole thing, that whole process is somewhere not there. And even I myself was very sure when we had the president of our nation was a lady, the UPA chairman was a lady, the speaker of our Lok Sabha was a lady, and the chief minister of Delhi was a lady. But nothing happened. We heard a lot of noise, but nobody took any action. The reservation bill came, many other bills came, many Nirbhaya cases came, everything came. We are still as insecure today as women in this town as when we were 10 years back.
In fact, India has secured one of the top positions in garnering the top posts in multinationals. And,
yes, absolutely.
You know, politically also,
yes.
The top jobs. But otherwise, we score very poorly. I mean, what a contradiction. Why do you think we have this contradiction, Shailaja? We have the most powerful women in the world. We also have the poorest and the most discriminated against. Why?
I would put it to two reasons. The first reason is what Devi just said, the fact that really men and women don't really care.
Yeah.
Second thing that bothers me is that there is no measurement. We look at crime statistics. That's not measurement. What needs to be measured much more is disparity and narrowing of gap. You'll be surprised to know that a million death study, which has been done in collaboration with the Registrar General of India, has brought out that till the age of 5, many more girl children die, never mind female feticide. This is after they are born, because mainly it is diarrhea.
They're neglected.
It's pure neglect.
It's not worth spending money on a girl child.
So if you really targeted prevention, you would get somewhere, but you're not targeting it. The attitude is, it doesn't matter. Age of marriage, you have a law which says 18, but you allow 40% of your girls to be married at 15, 16. Their body is not ready for any kind of childbearing. The second child comes in quick succession, both children suffer. These are things which everyone knows.
You know, it's interesting. I was reading a UN data which said that 60 million girls worldwide are married off before the age of 18. So it's not only a phenomenon in India. I think it's probably more focused in South Asia.
Yes, but we are talking about our country and our policy making and our will to enforce the law. Either we should have the attitude that the law is something which is not suitable for our country.
Right.
But when you know it is related to child mortality, women's deaths during pregnancy, during the maternal cycle, when you know it so well, it is pathetic that there is no policy maker that I have come across who has given a centerpiece to this. The Scandinavian countries just are shocked whenever I've related with people from Norway, Sweden. You may say Norway is the size of Karol Bagh. The fact remains that they do have indices which we aspire for. We're not going to reach those indices unless there is some kind of measurement. At the same time, to give a positive note on New Year's Day and not to say everything is in a state of bedlam, our total fertility rate has come down.
It has come down.
It has reached manageable levels, something that I think demographers said would not go on for the whole century. We've been able to do it latest by 2020, 2025. Child mortality has come down.
Yes.
The infant mortality has come down. This shows that there is some work going on. It's only a question of being able to measure whether that gap is narrowing. Where is it narrowing the most? Give them a pat on the back, get after the districts. There are 303 districts where all this is going wrong. You need focused attention on all these disparities. The figures are available, but they need to be taken seriously. I think through your channel, if members of parliament just looked at the data, it is enough to make anyone feel that you're being unfair to the girl child right from her embryonic stage right up to the time that she becomes a widow and dies. I mean, you know, it is a discrimination which can be addressed. You can't do everything. But do we even know the three most important things that will make a difference? I have my point of views. Everyone would have a point of view. But as a policy maker, I would say it is incumbent on the Women and Child Ministry, it is incumbent on the National Commission not to be reactive when rapes take place. That is your job, but to be much more proactive. How can you stop what's happening? You can't do everything. You can't get into people's homes. You can't stop incest. You can't stop these dowry deaths. You can't stop domestic beating up of women. That is happening throughout the world. It's going to happen here. But are you able to enforce the law about property, about ownership, about physical integrity? These things in even a fraction of the cases, as you said, if even one case ended quickly, sharply, fast, it would have a multiplier effect. But the feeling is it's business as usual. And at the same time, I would say that the reaction that came during Nirbhaya episode, it was it was something which I think nobody expected, which means deep down, it's not men versus women. It is a case where men do realize that their mothers, their daughters, their sisters are being targeted and they are helpless. So they would like policymakers to do something. So I feel that deep down there is not that kind of you might say complete feeling that you can neglect women. You want them to come up. But what is really worrisome is we're not measuring what's going wrong, we're not measuring who is doing better, and we're not measuring what would make the biggest difference, There are 20 things you can do. But there would be certainly from a policy point of view at least 2 or 3 which would make a sea difference in the next 5 years. I mean, if you give me time, I'll develop on that.
Right, talking about policy and laws, Maya, the present government made some important proposals, like the bill to enhance the powers of the National Commission for Women, the setting up of many one-stop crisis centers for women in distress, and the appointment of the chairperson and members of the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights. But these decisions have not been moved forward in the winter session. What do you think is the reason? If the intention is there, why was it not implemented? Why wasn't the action taken?
It's also in the way many of these laws have been, or proposed amendments have been envisaged. They are not the best of amendments. Of course, there is paralysis in terms of getting even the amendments that have been envisaged passed through discussion in the parliament and made into actual laws, there is a paralysis, but there's also, as I want to emphasize, there's also certain limitations in whatever laws that we are amending or wanting to amend, or new laws that we are thinking of. Like on the one hand, you will talk about increasing the powers of the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare. On the other hand, successive governments, the past 2-3 governments, have put into force acts such as, the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Prevention and Prohibition Act, which in some ways was an outcome of the women's movement struggle for safe workplaces. But an act like that, when juxtaposed, with other so-called progressive legislation, really sent alarm bells to the women's movement, to rights activists, because you realize that in terms of policies, now the government wants to push through employer-backed or employer-constituted committees that will investigate sexual harassment in the workplace. In workplaces, in homes, in the public space, we have to understand that these are unequal places. You can't introduce a law which says that we're going to investigate cases or complaints of sexual harassment in the workplace, which employers themselves are going to constitute. You see, there are dynamics of employer-employees which have to be understood. They have to be elected bodies in which women employees have their representation on such committees. However, nobody wants to talk about these issues. That is also one reason why we're seeing that apart from a paralysis in amending laws, even the laws that are being implemented are not per se in the favor of women. So you have both problems emerging. You have laws which are not good enough, which are in fact posing a hurdle in the long run to the women's movement, to the emancipation of women, and two laws which really the movement, women's movement, progressive movements are pushing through, but there is a resistance, an overall resistance. And I think it connects up to the issue of how successive governments are pushing through more and more of a neoliberal regime in terms of policies. You see, you can't have, we're going to introduce out of 100 laws, 10 laws which will be gender sensitive, and 90 laws which will eat into the economic sustenance of so many people. In terms of how we are thinking of education, long-term education policies, how we're thinking in terms of land acquisition, the way we're amending these laws. Aren't women part of those laws as well? Won't they also be affected by economic reforms where you're going to see enhanced privatization of the social sector, that means education, health? If these things are simultaneously happening,
Right.
one or two so-called, gender laws being introduced or amendments made to certain laws are not going to solve the problem.
We'll be back to this discussion after this very short break. Don't go away. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to Gender Discourse and a discussion on women's empowerment in 2014 and what 2015 has in store for us. Sonali, you're the communications director at HelpAge India. Tell me, when you have cases of older people who've been expelled from the family or who, they don't have a home to stay in anymore, are there more cases of women? Is there a gender bias there too than of men?
No, I don't think there's a gender bias there where older women are shunted out more than men, because I feel what happens is where property especially is an issue, where abuse cases are immense, where elderly are concerned. And we've conducted surveys out of which every time a survey is conducted, the primary abuser is the child. And the child is primarily the son, followed by the daughter-in-law. Only in the recent years, a little bit of the daughter has come, but that's the most minimalistic. And normally when property is being given away, the daughter is not even considered. It's, if you have, 2 sons and a daughter, the daughter normally she gets married off and goes off, and the property invariably gets basically separated between both the children. Now what is happening is, while an older person is living, and the mother is normally not the threat, the mother, but the father, who is the owner of the property, is normally targeted and is convinced during his living years ki aap property baat do. And what we keep telling the senior citizen is, in your living years, do not give your property away to your child or to anybody, a carer, anyone. You're more than willing to do whatever you have to in a will after you do pass away, because it's also a large part of your, besides financial difficulties that the older person will face, there's a largely, there's a trust factor which gets broken. There is mental fatigue which comes, and it's a couple. In fact, we've had cases where children have been wanting to split the mother and the father, saying that we can't take care of, we are married, we have our own children, we can't support 2 more older people. One can stay with the father and the mother can stay with me. And the parents obviously say, this stage in our life, we have only each other to look after.
The film Bagman
It is actually, Bhagwan was a reflection of what did
It was a
happen,
reflection of
what does
going on
happen.
here. Absolutely.
And it is horrific because at that age in life, you only need love, care, and somebody to support you. You're not looking at a financial hike or attaining some major financial moolah at that time.
Yeah.
But that's the time when if you don't bring up your children well, I feel to a large extent also there's a lot of peer pressure and exposure that happens. And where women are concerned, I feel, I think information, like Devi had said, a lot of women don't even know what they're entitled to. They're not even, they're not even, they don't feel strong enough to even fight for it. ऐसे कुछ नहीं होता, हो जाता है. And that attitude of हो जाता है needs to be, I think, dealt with, because at the end of the day, nobody can help you other than yourself. And that goes for any gender and for any issue for that matter. And if the women don't take reins, then there's, I mean, it's easy to say that, my son didn't take care of me or my husband didn't take care of me or whoever, but you have, for that you need to know.
Yes,
and,
absolutely. Information is very
imperative,
important.
and most of them
right.
don't know.
Yes. Well, for those of you who want to participate in this discussion, you can call us on our toll-free number 1-800-11-5314, and the other number is 2303-5420. We'll wait for your calls. I was part of a team that did some research on, the witch hunts in Jharkhand. It was, of course, almost all of them were cases of women who were declared witches and thrown out of the families. Some of them were killed by their own families. But the reason behind that was property. Yeah. They were old women, and the son and the daughter-in-law wanted the property of the mother, and so they went to the witch doctor and paid her or bribed her to declare the mother a witch, so that there would be a consensus in the village if they threw her out, or even if she was murdered, nobody would question that. So property, I think, is involved as far as women in rural India are concerned.
But I think also, Sohila, there, I mean, I'm assuming that the mother is a widow.
Yes, absolutely.
She is a widow. Yeah. Yes, because normally
she doesn't have the protector anymore. Shielding.
So that is also, and not well informed.
Yes.
Not well informed. There you go. It's the crux of it is they will not know, and especially in rural India where everybody's together, the villages are also together. It's a small community, so everybody looks out for each other. Now, if they've already bribed the witch doctor, and who is apparently has a status within the village, people will listen to. It's a lack of information, which is why the mother obviously can't fight her own.
Lack of information. In fact, we were talking to one of the boys. I think his name was Gurudas Marandi, a 17-year-old boy. It was a very famous case a few years back where he hacked his sister-in-law to death, beheaded her. Now, he said that all the male members of my family are dying because she's a witch. Somebody has told me she's a witch, and I'm convinced. We went in, we did a thorough investigation, we went to the doctors, and we saw the reports, and the men were dying of TB, and this boy was in jail. So we actually went to the jail and we informed him that it's not her powers of witchcraft, it's just that the male members of your family have TB, So you're very right about that. It's a lack of information, it's a lack of access to a medium that, of knowledge. But now with the internet in the village, and people getting a little more educated, perhaps, hopefully this problem can be taken care of.
That also depends on how much
the government... Though it will take a long time.
No, and how much the government is ready to spend on giving out that information. SMS or media or internet or whatever, they need to spend, like Shailja was saying here, that policies. You can make 1,000 policies, you can pass thousands of bills. Unless and until we don't know what our right is, and we are not encouraged by our different family members or by the panchayats or the sarpanchas, no woman in India today will have the guts to go out and say something against their family. वो तो immediately witch क्या उसको तो गांव में डायन बना देंगे, या शहर में भी बोलेंगे ये इतनी gandhi hai, they'll use all kinds of phrases.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, that she's gone against us, she can go against you tomorrow. So that kind of confidence needs to be given to a girl or a woman in our society today or in this country today, that okay, there are laws with you, the police has to be there for her, not that anybody can go and bribe them.
Yes.
So the whole mindset needs to change, and especially also of our men folk. That the woman back home has some respect. She's as good as I am. Okay, she may not be the earning member, but she looks after your house. She's the one who looks after your children. ये जो हमारा mindset है ना, this whole thing just
Yes, and
needs
the
to
saddest
be
part of this was that the witch doctor was a woman.
Yeah, see?
The one who pronounced other women witches was a woman. Okay, Shailaja, I'm going to throw some data at you again. India's ranking in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index has slipped from the 101st in 2013 to the 114th number this year. India ranked 114 out of 142 nations on the World Economic Forum's 2014 Gender Gap Index, and scored below average on parameters like economic participation, educational attainment, health and survival. So why are we so poorly off?
Well, I think for the same reason that earlier also I had said, that one is not bothered about the fact that the measurement, these statistics are Indian statistics given to the various agencies. They would not have made their statistics. That means we are aware, we have the data, but we are not comparing it and taking people to task who should really be.
But these are the statistics of the World Economic Forum.
Yes, but where do they get them? They get them from national governments.
Right,
Yeah, they
right.
don't make their own surveys.
Right.
So national governments have given this. It's not just crime. It's all a question of these kinds of indices. I was part of something called the SIGI, which is called Social Institutions Gender Index, done by OECD, in which they ranked all the countries in the world, but they decided to limit it to a few countries, say about 100, because they've said that there is no comparable data available. So whichever countries have comparable data, let us use it. Now, India improved its position. Surprisingly, in the SIGI study, in the 2012 SIGI, India improved its position. I was quite surprised, because the kind of data you've given is what we know.
Yes.
So how did India improve its position? For the mere fact that because of the 73rd, 74th Amendment, women had huge political voice in the panchayats and urban local bodies. Immediately, political voice area, your bar chart went flying up. So even if you were really lingering somewhere else, on the whole, when you did that kind of, you might say, analysis which is statistical, you went up.
Right. Shailaja, we might have to wait here because we have a caller. Our first caller, Bhat Raj from Rajasthan. Bhat, are you on the line?
Good evening, madam.
Good evening. Tell me, what is your question?
Ji madam, now we are discussing in all over India, but our main motto is to get place in developed countries, madam. But a lot of problems, I am from Rajasthan, madam, about women empowerment, in which generally people follow primitive superstitions about God and other problems like bhoot or pret. So what should be our new generation view about this situation, and what should we do? Because madam, my next question is that generally they are followed by this type of problem, superstition, and related to gods. So madam, what is the real problem and what is the real philosophy about God and this bhoot or pret?
Well, would you care to answer this, Shailaja?
This is
We were just discussing it.
We were discussing it. We were. It's. I mean, to be very frank about it, this is definitely promoted by vested interests. This witchcraft and doing all these things. It is also perpetrating fear. The film PK has been controversial, but I do remember one thing that it brought out, which is very true. Why do you go to God-men? Why do you seek solace? Because somebody has ingrained in you, if you don't do it, something bad will happen. So this is the kind of, you might say, mindset which is prevailing, and people believe, one, that it is something which is, you're doing a sacrifice, it is good for you. The whole family will benefit if you're able to get rid of an evil spirit. But that woman is an evil spirit is definitely the outcome of some other vested interest created by somebody interested in seeing that vested interest outcome benefiting someone. Now, one cannot police individual families, one cannot police individual villages, but what one could certainly do is to somehow, again I come back to it, measure whether women are living, whether women are, in the gap is narrowing in the under 5 mortality, in which case they will go to school. if you can measure how many districts the marriages before 18 are coming down, you are then going to give the opportunities that women will need. They cannot get educated unless they get the opportunity to go to school. If they're doing sibling care and they're doing domestic stuff, things like, they'll never go to school.
Right.
So I would say that this kind of thing, if it is part of policy, I know a lot of policy gets made and doesn't get acted on, but this is not just a health issue, it is not just a woman and child issue, it is not just a labor issue. Most of the women are employed in agricultural cultivators. They are just doing planting of rice and wheat. That is a dead-end kind of a thing. How many of them are moving into bigger areas? So I would say that whether it is badly, I mean, the need to realize this witchcraft, that poor man in Pune lost his life. It was not a women issue. It was a question that this superstition is driving people to a...
Right, right. You were talking about the labor force, you know, women working on the fields. Maya, India has been declared as part of the 20 worst performing countries on the labor force participation. Estimated earned income, literacy rate and sex ratio at birth indicators. But we were talking about this contradiction. On the other hand, India is among the top 20 best performing countries on the political empowerment sub-index. So can you explain this discrepancy? And are they interrelated?
Okay. Definitely, I think it's very possible to see in a society where there is large amounts of inequality, to see a certain section of women in each community rise. And typically that happens on the political front, both in local bodies and in all India platforms or national level bodies. But the question is, and despite the rise of a few, the majority remained oppressed, and that is a typical condition in many developing and underdeveloped countries. It's not peculiar to our country. So the question today for 2015 for women's groups, for all progressive movements and activists, is how to make sure that the majority rise with the minority, that is being able to access political rights, economic rights. And that is what I think the biggest challenge of 2015 is. You see, yes, statistics have their politics, you know, and we can interpret statistics in different ways, but I think the majority of people on the ground think that the statistics are reflecting one thing, which is that you can, for example, in the sphere of education, so I'm talking about higher education in our country, India, we have been seeing a small amount of growth in the gross enrollment ratio, which is again an important indices of where, for example, women and children, where is the level of their development. We see how educated they are. Now, the gross enrollment ratio has increased over the last 15 years or so, but it's interesting if you break down that statistic or if you push these figures a little further, you'll see hidden facts. For example, you are seeing more women and children, especially the girl child, being forced into informal education. So you might be seeing enrollment ratios grow, but they are usually going into what I'd call distance education mode or technical education, which equips them for certain kind of employment only. And I'll give an example from Delhi University itself, a premier educational institution for higher learning. Majority of the students who apply go into distance education.
We'll come back to this point because even I have a point to make. We'll be back after this short break. Don't go away.